Commission. I'm Mary. I'm here at the librarian at the Salem Library here. And I'd like to welcome Fred Colgren and John Burton from the Gilmore Car Museum. And they're going to be presenting tonight on the history of the DeLorean. So, welcome.
Well, thank you.
Welcome very much.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you very much. John and I are both retired teachers. And it's funny, John and I are part of the education team at the Gilmore. We have probably 15 folks on our team. All of them are, I think almost all of them are retired, aren't they? Yep. And we need them to do all the programs that we do at the museum. And it's funny that many of them are teachers. John and I just happen to have both taught high school for 37 years exactly, the same number of years. John was a history teacher, has been involved in history for 40 years, and I was the choral music director at Kalamazoo Central High School. So we probably, some of the choirs from this area we probably crossed paths in MSVMA and stuff. So anyway, we're from the Gilmore Car Museum. The Gilmore is located in Hickory Corners, which is just about a mile north of the north end of Gull Lake. And Gull Lake is sort of located equidistant between Battle Creek, Kalamazoo, right? The bottom part of the mitten here, you know. And the equidistant half-hour north is Gull Lake, and then just north of that's the museum. And it's the largest car museum in North America. We have 90 acres, we have of land, we've got a beautiful campus, a lot of historic buildings, some replica buildings there too. Also, we have 400 or 500 cars on display, spread out all over the whole museum. We have a number of partners, a beautiful replica of a 1920s Ford Model A dealership. The H.H. Franklin Club is there, also Lincoln, Cadillac, and Pierce Arrow buildings, separate buildings, all part of our campus. And that doesn't include, I mean, it's really grown and expanded. So yeah, if you haven't been there, come over and see it. The outside of our campus, probably about half the campus is closed April 1st to, or December 1st through April 1st. So but we have a large, huge area inside that's all open all year round now, so it's pretty neat. Anyway, we're going to talk about John DeLorean and the history of the DeLorean and really the history of John's life and the car and so on. But before we do, we're going to try to take you through a very quick history of the automobile because it leads up, it's important looking ahead at John. John was an important person at Chrysler, at General Motors, and he did a lot design-wise and made a real big impact on the industry. So let's just look ahead at this. Oops.
So this is as much about innovation of the cars as it is about DeLorean.
How do we get from here to here, right? From there to here. Model A, beautiful old Model T, excuse me. That's in one of our historic barns on the second floor of one of our barns in the summertime.
You may have heard of the phrase that you can have any color Model T you want as long as it's
black, right?
Not just entirely true. Early on, the first 4 years, you get them red, green, blue, or black. That car is number 131 out of the over 15 million Model Ts made. So it's a very, very rare car.
The very first car, of course, was go ahead, John, you got Motorwagen.
You know, if you ask 10 Americans who made the first car, 9 out of 10 of them are going to say Henry Ford, and they're all going to be wrong. It's Carl Benz, and he invented the Motorwagen in 1886 in Mannheim, Germany. And we have a tendency to think about the auto industry as being predominantly male-dominated industry. Well, it never would have started if it hadn't been for a woman. And the woman being Bertha Benz, Carl's wife. When she married Carl, traditionally in Europe, you would bring a dowry to the marriage, money paid by the wife, family to take the daughter off their hands, just a tad bit sexist. But so she brings all the money to the marriage, and she encourages Carl to build his dream, this motor wagon. Well, she sees all this money going out, and she doesn't see any money coming back in. So she's trying to convince Carl to market the car, and he won't do it. He won't take it out of the courtyard of the factory in Mannheim. So she got up one morning and she stole the car. And she and her two sons drove from Mannheim, Germany to Pforzheim, Germany. And once they got past, once people got past the idea that she might be a witch, they wanted to know where they could get a car like it. They were really interested, so she not only brings the money to invest in building it, she also develops the first market. And she was a very savvy lady. She knew a lot about the construction of the car, enough so that she could fix it when it broke down a couple times. And you think about the first road trip, car runs on gas, where are you going to get gas?
There are no gas stations.
No gas stations. And she would stop at pharmacies, and she bought this chemical called Le Groin. And Le Groin was a kind of a spot remover, petroleum based, and it burned, but it was not really gasoline. But think about that as being the first gasoline powered car. Next. So gasoline powered, you got a Model T. Like I said, over 15 million Model Ts are made. If you were standing on a street corner in 1925 and you heard a car coming, and you shut your eyes and tried to guess what kind of car it was, if you guessed it was a Model T, you had a 60% chance of being right, because 60% of all the cars on the road are Model Ts. Next. A lot of steam-powered cars. This is a Stanley steamer. Steam-powered cars were really an efficient car. Stanley set a land speed record in a steam-powered car of 120 miles an hour. That's moving right along. This is also a Stanley steamer. Okay, the third thing that can power your car, you got gas, you got steam. Third thing that can power your car is electric. Now, we have a tendency to think about when, electric cars today, we're thinking about Teslas, Chevy Volts. It's all new modern technology. Well, the first electric car was built 2 years before the first gasoline-powered car. Now, it only went about 1.5 miles before it ran out of battery, but the first real practical car, one of the oldest cars that we have in the museum, is a 1901 Columbia Electric. And it's the first car the president ever rode in was Teddy Roosevelt, and he rode in that. This is a Roush and Lang, 1915, and people called it a living room on wheels. Women really liked electric cars. Pedestrians did not like electric cars because you couldn't hear them coming. But women, you imagine, wearing the old dress, down to the ground, long sleeves, gloves, big old hat. Crank starting a car was number one difficult, number two not very ladylike. So women, it's one of the reasons why women liked electric cars most. In fact, Clara Ford, Henry Ford's wife, demanded that Henry give her an electric car, a Detroit Electric. Now, we'll let Fred talk more about Henry or Edsel Ford, but you got 25 million Model Ts out there, and if you look at a bar chart, it goes up and up and up and up. Takes a dip during World War I, then up and up and up again to 24, 25, and it levels off. And why do you think it levels off? Competition. One time or another, there are 2,500 different car companies. And why is there competition? Well, people had Model Ts. They'd seen Model Ts. Their Model Ts are still running. And Edsel tells his dad, we got to come up with a new model car. And Henry says, hell no, we make Model Ts here and that's what we're going to make. Well, the sales just drop like a stone. And so in 1927, Chevy outsells Ford for the first time. And Henry said, that's enough of that. And so he tells Edsel to come up with the design of a new car. Edsel had been working on it for 2 years. He was ready to roll. So within 7 months, they're able to go to production. and they're gonna call the new car Model A. Henry was asked by the old reporter from the old Detroit Tribune, "Sir, how come you went from Model A to Model T and then back to Model A again?" Henry said, "Because my company, I can call it whatever the hell I want." Henry's not a real nice guy. Edsel did all the design work. Henry took all the credit for it. Go on, Scott.
Edsel, big hero for Ford Motor Company, big hero for Detroit, big hero for our nation. Built a little run plant, B-24 bombers. He and Charles Sorensen. They did a lot for our country, a lot for Ford Motor Company, and he was sort of an unsung hero. But he's extremely talented. But this is sort of the turning point here. You've got all these early buggies with engines in them, right? And that's what a car was, a buggy with an engine in it, right? Even the Stanley steamers. And so now all of a sudden, people, and Edsel was one of the first ones here to really pioneer this at Ford Motor Company. We're thinking of an automobile as a work of art, right? Something that should be beautiful, right? Streamlined maybe, or might have some color in it, right? And so this is really Edsel Ford, design, color, and style. That's what he was all about. And if the Model A comes out, not only is it no longer just black, it's got 3 or 4 colors in it, right? And they have many, many more styles now of the car. So you have all these new innovations. Edsel works with Lincoln and designs some of the most beautiful cars in the history of the automobile, all in through the 30s, right? And he was a real driving force, moving the car, the automobile, and thinking of it as a work of art, right? Another person, here's Model A. Look at all the color on that vehicle. And he took a lot of the styling cues from Lincoln and brought them into the Model A.
Remember that Ford's main idea was that he wanted to keep prices of cars low. So how can you keep the price of the cars low? All the framework, all the chassis on all the cars, all the different models of Model A, all the way from a roadster to a school bus. They're all based on the same frame, same engine, same transmission. If you've got a school bus, it's going to have a little longer frame to the chassis, but all based on the same stuff. That way you're going to be able to keep the prices low.
And this is an example of Edsel's work at Lincoln. Edsel brought in a lot of custom coach folks, coach builders, made commitments to them, brought them into the family of Lincoln. And Edsel was driving force behind this vehicle. Very beautiful vehicle, very modern for 1940, right? Look at the waterfall, the Art Deco hood ornaments, a lot of Art Deco features on the dash, the big fender skirts covering the tire. Very modern for that era. So DeLorean and Edsel, and obviously DeLorean's way down the road, but these guys, the Edsel being one of the early ones, really changing the idea of the automobile. Here's Edsel's personal speedster that he had made, a custom speedster. Harley Earl at General Motors, another giant, really, when you think of moving forward in the automobile design. And many of you know those designs that Harley Earl brought into the industry. He came up with the idea of a concept car, right? And so he made lots of changes. Look at the fins on these cars, these concept cars. You know, that you remember the big Cadillac fins, right, in the late 50s. Well, Harley Earl, he was really the father of the idea of a concept car, something that everybody became aware of it. Everybody started doing concept cars. Interesting quote here by Harley Earl. The last part of it, important factors in the marketing of the automobile. In other words, all these design cues and are important, right? The color, the shape, the design, the art of the automobile. This is important, right? Well, in the very early days, it wasn't important at all. And, you know, we really weren't even thinking about that. So in other words, people want their wants, needs, and desires fulfilled, right? in their automobiles. Color is important to the buyer. They want the car they think is good looking. Somebody might buy a car and they think, oh, this is a beautiful car. Well, the other person might think, I think it's ugly, you know. Or I've heard a small percentage of I think it's a small percentage, maybe I'm wrong, but there's a small percentage of our population, they don't care what the car looks like, right? They just want to get from point A to point B, and they don't care if the car is black, white, green, polka dot, whatever it is. They just take it, drive it, they don't care. Well, most people do care about these elements, and these were the things that these designers were after. People want modern features in their car, especially today. They're becoming extremely technical. Everybody's got the GPS, the screens built in. They've got a much safer car. You know, you swerve over into a lane, you get a beep on your car. If you put your turn signal on, somebody's in your blind spot, your car tells you, right? It starts going beep, 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 right? Yes, these modern cars, the most recent cars, are very much safer, right? They have backup cameras. You can see where you're backing. Some cars even park themselves. I mean, all these features, some people I know are they really desire these features. But all of this modernization is important to people. John DeLorean, born in 1925, born in Detroit. He has immigrant parents from Hungary. Were really struggling. He's the oldest of 4 sons. Family struggles financially all the way through the years. They're raising their children. Father ends up leaving. John attends the Detroit public schools. And throughout his entire educational career, he excels at everything. He's an extremely good student, enjoys education, and excels at it. He is honored by being accepted at Cass Tech. Do you know about Cass Tech? Anybody here heard about Cass Tech, downtown Detroit? Very fine school. I first got connected with them and heard about them when I was teaching music, and we were in Ann Arbor, and we were at our annual convention. It used to be held there years ago, and who was performing but the Cass Tech harp ensemble, right? What high school has a harp ensemble? Well, Cass Tech does, and I'll tell you, it's a beautiful thing to see such a thing. And what a fine school, big reputation. He was accepted there and did very well. Was in the National Honor Society, he was an honor student, was highly successful. This is the old Cass Tech, right? It was designed by the famous architect Albert Kahn, who designed a lot of the Ford buildings, designed some of the Ford homes. He also was prominent in designing a lot of buildings in America, Battle Creek Post Office, the Highland Park plant, Ford Motor Company, just all over the place. His influence was huge. This building's no longer there. It's replaced with an ultra-modern high school. Has anybody seen the new high school or experienced it all? I've seen pictures of it, but I haven't been in it. But I knew some of the teachers at the school, and what a fine school it was. This is DeLorean's boyhood home in Detroit. After high school, he went to attended Lawrence Tech, and during his time there, he got drafted into the Army. As soon as his stint in the Army was over, he came back and finished his career there, getting a degree in industrial engineering. From there, he went to the Chrysler Institute, got a master's in automotive engineering, and from there he went to the University of Michigan and got an MBA. And you really got to love school to do that, master's degree. Then let's go get another master's degree, And he hadn't really gotten started. Here he is. His early automotive career began at Chrysler for a short period of time. He then went over to Packard, helped design the Packard torque converter, a new torque converter, and the ultramatic transmission. And he was very, they were very happy with him there. Got recruited by GM and was given his choice of departments that he wanted to work in. Eventually, DeLorean became the youngest division head at GM in GM history. Here's his bachelor home in Bloomfield Hills, where he lived as a bachelor. He eventually ended up having 4 different wives over the rest of his lifetime. He lived in Bloomfield Hills, California, New York, and Belfast, Ireland. DeLorean's philosophy is when he's at GM, he kept butting heads with the administration because he wanted to move forward. He had seen what was going on in the streets. Guys are buying cars, they're tuning those cars, right? They're modifying them because they want them to go faster, they want improved handling, they want all these things. So they're out on the streets in their cars, and he sees this and he says, you know, we're really not meeting the needs of the young people who want to buy cars. And this was his attitude, you know, of what the public wants today. And he was frustrated with that, and he kept butting heads with all of them. And he finally said, you know, finally convinced them that, yeah, we'll go with you. Go ahead. You go ahead and give us the car you want.
One of the things that he did to bring that to the attention of the bigwigs is he'd hot rod up a car and take it out on Woodward Avenue in Detroit. And I don't know if you know, but Detroit all that well, but the Woodward Avenue Dream Cruise, you know, every year it's a huge thing. But they go out and race on Woodward Avenue, all along Woodward, from downtown all the way out to Birmingham. All the traffic lights are a quarter-mile apart. Great for drag racing, quarter-mile drag race. And he'd load up this, you know, a big block engine and a light car, and he'd just blow the doors, and he'd race it himself, and he'd just blow the doors off these hot rodders. And they wanted to know where they could get one. So he's going out and creating a market for early muscle cars. And the earliest muscle car is the GTO. And all it was what was the
Tempest, yeah.
Yeah, the Tempest with a big block engine in it.
But that was his baby, and it was a wild success, and he proved his point with the bigwigs that, hey, you know, these kids want stuff that's got some power.
And nobody thought it would
got
sell.
some appeal.
So they started off with a production run of like 400 or 500 cars. Well, they were gone within a week, and people wanted more, so they had to extend their production run on it. It became one of the most not powerful, but one of the most popular cars around. That's what GTO stands
GTO,
for.
right? Advantage touring class, yeah. So the GTO, still popular today with collectors and with owners. He also had his hand in the Pontiac Firebird. I love this style, this early style. I had a 68, looked almost identical. That was a hardtop. What beautiful lines. And the whole Pontiac, this whole Pontiac era is a beautiful era for Pontiac. And that's thanks to John DeLorean.
Instead of the stodgy Buicks and Cadillacs.
Right. Really, really beautiful cars. This is John DeLorean. A car should make people's eyes light up when they step into the showroom. Do any of you remember when I was younger, we used to go down to the showrooms in September, right? When the new models were coming in. And we'd go see them. You know, it was a big deal, right? And I remember doing that and how exciting that was. Or you look through magazines or newspapers, want to see what the new Firebird looked like, or the GTO, or the Mustang, right? So you wanted to check that stuff out and see it. Go to the auto show, and they'd have the newest cars, and it was a big deal. Here's John with one of his wives, and she was we're going to go back here. We're going to have to go back through and put in all the wives as we go through the presentation. Grand Prix, another big success for Pontiac, long-running success. Here's John's home in Bloomfield Hills. The Vega, anybody remember the Vega? Yeah, my next door neighbor had one that was really cool car, I remember. I think it was a hatchback like that. Yeah, it was a great car, and another John DeLorean contribution. The Nova, pretty iconic vehicle, right? I mean, he goes over into Chevy now, of course, with the Vega and the Nova. Very important, got involved with that. And at this point, John DeLorean is making some big bucks. I think he made about $200,000. We're going to look at those figures in a minute.
Yeah.
This is California home. He was involved in traveling all over the United States, and he also bought an athletic team or a share in one of the California athletic teams, and he also had a share in the New York Yankees at one time. And this is his California home. He was on track to be the president of General Motors, but he really just didn't fit in with his jet-setting lifestyle. You know, he was traveling all over the world. He was totally different than your garden variety GM executive group.
This is like wife number 3 or 4.
Yeah, this is after
I think it's number 4 because I think it's during his trial.
But he was on track, to going right up to the top. He was president of he was head of all cars and trucks at General Motors, so, he's right up there. But he decides in 1963 to pursue this new idea, this dream that he had. They said he was making $200,000 a year at GM, and at the time that was the equivalent of 1.9 million in what we would think of in 2019, I think the figure said. But here's the iconic DeLorean. The gull wings from the DeLorean really got started back in the first gull wing was in the 52 Mercedes race car, which was not really a production vehicle, but this one here is the production vehicle, the 54.
Go back one slide.
The 54 SL.
If you look
300
at the door, you're trying to get in and out of the door, that's a pretty big step to go over that
It's
side.
high and it's wide. Yeah, it's real wide. So here's the production car. That's also wide. This is pretty wide right in here. But to have one of these, oh my goodness, extremely valuable now, and just beautiful cars. Here's some other gull wings. Here's a couple examples. The auto car, sort of a mini car. Lamborghini. This Marco car is sort of interesting. Mercedes. Aston Martin. The Bricklin, we have a Bricklin on display right now. Another interesting car. A little earlier, came out before the DeLorean did, but pretty neat car.
We were giving a tour one day to a group, and the guy we come around to the Bricklin, and he goes, I was the engineer who designed the brake system on that. So it was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. It's a neat car. It was a gift to the museum. We had a donation. Somebody donated that Bricklin. I'm glad they did. It fits right in with her. When John started his company, he moved to his office to New York City. They were looking for, the car had been engineered in Detroit, and they were looking for an engine. We were trying to decide, what engine are we going to put in this vehicle? And at the time, he lived in the Bedminster estate, which Trump bought after he went through a personal bankruptcy. Trump bought this from DeLorean, bought the house, and now it's the golf club, the Bedminster Golf Club. I think it's the clubhouse there. And it used to belong to John DeLorean before that. They end up going to, let's talk here on the features first. Clean lines, timeless design. It's still a cool car today. Do you guys agree with that? Yeah, it's really a beautiful, sleek car, the body of which will never rust, right? It's made out of stainless steel.
It's not designed for people who are bulk blessed, They don't fit in very well. And if you don't have your head in the right spot when you shut the door, you'll shut it on your head. If you
They have a little,
look on this door here, there's a little pocket right there. That's where you have to have your head.
yeah,
If
there's
you get
an
over too far to the
indentation.
side, you'll whop yourself.
And the door
I'll
goes
attest to
really, the door goes really low. You know, so it's not hard to, well, I mean, it's low to the ground. But you don't, it's not like the first Mercedes where you have the big, wide, high thing to get over. It's pretty low. And like I said, that indentation on the top of each one of those is designed for the taller person. John DeLorean was pretty tall. Stainless steel body, it will never rust. Sleek, modern interior, high quality materials, leather interior they use throughout most of them. Featured an Italian design by Giorgetto Giugiaro, and he had been experimenting with a lot of different ideas. This man here, Bill Collins Jr., anybody know about Bill or heard of him before? He was a Detroit resident. He worked for John and helped with all the engineering on all of John's projects. In other words, GTO all the way up through. And Bill was an engineer, and he engineered the DeLorean and did all the engineering in Detroit and then they got this offer to move over to Belfast and be involved with or have the plant over there, and they got a large sum of money from the British government. We'll talk about that in a minute.
He lives up in Northport, north of Traverse City, right on Traverse Bay.
Yep.
And Fred and I, we were doing like a 3-day presentation at the Montessori schools in Traverse City. And we went up and we interviewed him in his living room. Beautiful log home sitting up on top of the hill overlooking the bay. And that's his garage.
Yeah, in this car, his DeLorean is sitting in his garage, and the little V there stands for Vixen. That was his. He also designed the last project he worked on was a motorhome
Motorhome,
called a Vixen.
yeah.
Might have
Dixon 21.
Yes, and it was a long car, a long
21.
motorhome, sort of like
21 feet long.
yeah, sort of, but it's not high, it's low, so you could
You
get ready to drive it through a regular garage door. That was one of the features.
It was no higher at the roof than my head, so you could park it in a normal garage. I mean,
That was
so
his
a
last.
garage is 21 feet long, but
Yeah, there's a picture of it on the wall, sort of like it's sort of like a GM motorhome, except it's low enough to drive through a normal garage
you
door.
know, BMW engine in it, moved.
But he did all the engineering, and he did, and prepared all the drawings and all the engineering for the DeLorean. And then they were in search of an engine. And then when they decided to move across the pond, that's when Bill Collins was sort of pushed out of the operation.
They got hooked up with Lotus,
Mhm.
and he kind of got forced out of the picture. And he wasn't bitter about it at all, but they're trying to find an engine to go in the DeLorean. And what they ended up with was a kind of a combination of two companies, Peugeot and Renault.
Volvo and Renault, yeah, there were three companies, and it was
They
a
developed the
combination.
engine, so it's kind of, it's a fun car to drive, but it's kind of underpowered. It's still cool.
When I drove, we have a DeLorean at the museum, it's an 81, and I've driven it a couple times. One night I took it home with me, parked in my garage, and we took it down to a big event in Kalamazoo, in the park downtown. And so I drove it in, and then I took it back to the museum that night. And I also had a number of MGs, and I thought that was the closest thing I could describe. I thought it drove sort of like an MG, you know, which is a good, I think that's a good recommendation, but it's not super powerful, but it drove real well and handled well and was fun to drive. And I don't care when or where, but if you show up in a DeLorean, I mean, people those doors go up and people just go nuts. They love the styling and they remember the movie, of course. And that was a big part of the legend of the whole thing. But they're still out there. But Bill was a hero, a big hero in the sense that he was the substance behind the engineering on all of those projects at General Motors. He was a really, really big contributor. We shot an interior. See how low the edge of the sill is here? Over here again, pretty low to the ground, easy to get in and out. Yet, I don't know if you've read anything about this, but Johnny Carson bought a DeLorean. He also invested about, I think about $500,000. Sammy Davis Jr. invested a couple $100,000. But the gigantic investment came from the British government. They invested almost $200 million to help them and come over there. When they moved over there and established their company over there, it became, John DeLorean was like a king, you know. Here in Belfast, Northern Ireland, you have the Catholics and the Protestants, you know, that are having all this conflict during this period. And here they were all working together in the factory, you know, and providing a lot of jobs for people. They're very enthusiastic, and they're really excited about the fact they could, you know, work there and on a new project like this. So it was a big deal. Production years, of course, many of you know this, but only made DeLoreans over these 2 years, 81 and 82. This was John DeLorean's home in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Pictures of the setup there. When the leadership changed and Margaret Thatcher came in, they pulled the funding for the project, and then
She was a conservative.
started to run into trouble, which was too bad because it's creating a lot of jobs and there was a lot of enthusiasm.
She was a conservative Tory, and the Labour government that had been prior to her were the ones that had really been involved in funding this and creating all these huge number of jobs. And when she became in charge, the conservative Tories pulled the money, and so they're kind of screwed. You know, where's DeLorean going to get the money he needs?
Some of the DeLoreans were made. They had these a couple different colors they made them in, which I thought was totally no, we can't do this, you know, because the beautiful stainless steel bodies were so beautiful, and that was the cool thing about it. So they started making it yellow and red. So cocaine trafficking. This was the thing that threw everything into a problem. John DeLorean was arrested in October 1982, and because of the entrapment scheme, he was really entrapped by these people. He did take the bait and was in the room. They had all these tapes of him saying certain things, but eventually the jury found him not guilty because it was a scheme that was set up to bring him in and entrap him. So they were trying to frame him, and he got acquitted. And then there was another trial having to do with some missing funds, about $17.5 million, and he also was acquitted of that. This is the Framing DeLorean film. Have any of you seen this little documentary? What'd you think about that?
It was informative. I mean,
Yeah.
it painted a picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it was too, and our friend Bill Collins is in there. They interviewed him, and I wanted more. You know, I wanted to see more of or have even more information, but it was still pretty well done. I think I'd heard rumors that they were going to do a more advanced film on DeLorean's life, you know, and do a more extended one. But I thought it was fun to see it and I thought they did a good job laying out the facts. The movie Back to the Future was a huge deal, and still is, really. Very, very popular. The first Back to the Future one, this is in '85, July 3rd, '85. John DeLorean's still alive, during this period. In fact, live on until 2005. So he really had an opportunity to appreciate all this, and that's pretty cool. '89, Back to the Future 2, and 3, and '90. So these films really put DeLorean, I think they really brought back the whole spirit of the DeLorean. John DeLorean died of stroke in 2005. His ashes are interned in Troy, Michigan. The thing, I heard an interview with one of John DeLorean's, I think it was his wife, and she was saying, they were so depressed about what happened to the company, but then the DeLorean guys would call them up, and they'd say, hey, we're having a gathering, a bunch of the DeLorean Club guys, we're all getting together, we're bringing our cars, we're going to be over here. We'd love to have John come down and say hi, And they're going, you mean that's how people feel about our cars? They were starting to feel like, oh, nobody cares anymore, but people do care. They still care, And if he was still around, they'd be inviting him to come to DeLorean stuff, to car shows and Cars and Coffees, and they'd be inviting him to come to all sorts of stuff. And they were so gratified when they found that out, that all these DeLorean owners out there, they're really enthusiastic. We have a number of them at the museum. One young man, he brings his DeLorean to everything, all the cruise-ins, all the shows, and we've even featured it in a couple of our programs, and he's so enthusiastic, and you can really get bit by the bug. DeLoreans today, DeLorean Motor Company today, where is it? What happened to it? Does anybody know? Is it still there? Are they still out there? They're out there. The cars are out there, right? Well, there's one in the Midwest, in Illinois, that's a regular DeLorean. It's called DMC Midwest. You can take your car there, you can have it rebuilt. They can do anything to it that needs to be done. They have DeLorean parts, they have lots of DeLorean parts, and they can fix almost anything on your car right there in Midwest. In fact, my friend that's at the museum takes his there on a regular basis, and so on. There's one in California, one in Florida, and the big one in Texas. And what they've done, this gentleman here, Stephen Wen, DMC Texas, he's been working on DeLoreans since the DeLorean came out. And he started to produce modern versions of the DeLorean. It's a real DeLorean car, but what they've done is they've gone through and they'll redo the entire car. They'll rebuild it. They have a screen in there, all the high-tech things that we find in our car are in the new DeLorean, and he's rebuilding and updating the DeLorean motor cars and then selling them.
They bought up all the new old stock.
Yep.
So they transported all from Ireland to Texas. And so you can buy an actual DeLorean made from the old stock, but it's new old stock. It's never been on the road before.
And they're all updated, brand new dashboard, really cool. And 2017 they made 12, and they're $100,000 a piece, and his goal is to get 300 of them. There's Steve there, to get up to 300 produced. He's been working on that, on DeLoreans since the beginning. But these shops are pretty cool because they're just totally devoted to DeLoreans, and you'll never have to worry about getting parts or anything.
And they're all handmade.
Yep, it's pretty cool. And here's John DeLorean with his dream car, and there he is. That's the end of our talk tonight. I think he's sitting in is it a GTO or a
Looks like
Firebird or something? It's a Pontiac. I'm pretty sure. I'm almost positive it's Pontiac.
Too big of a back seat for a Firebird.
Yeah. But he really, if you think about it, he made the same kind of contribution to American design and that Edsel that Edsel did, and maybe even Harley Earl, you know, if you think about it, because he brought really the whole idea of American muscle car into General Motors. Now, were they making Mopars over at Chrysler? Yeah. In fact, they were doing it a little bit earlier than he was. But he could not get them off the dime until finally, when he made that GTO, they realized, yeah, we've got something here. This is it, you know. And so he made a gigantic contribution to the history of, and then the same thing happened at Ford, right? And the same thing happened at Chrysler. Same things, you know, happening all over with muscle cars. People wanted cars. They could go to the dealership, they could buy a car, drive it off the dealership floor, and they could drive it fast, you know, straight line. They could get some power out of it. It would arrive at the dealer with horsepower, and that's what, you know, he made a huge contribution. I think today, probably one of the biggest, most popular, I guess you'd call, automobile genres is the muscle car, right? We're going to build a giant 25,000 square foot building at the Gilmore Car Museum just devoted to muscle cars, you know. And we've never had anything like that before. We've always had displays. We have muscle cars, you can come and see them, but this is going to be devoted to that. And we'll have a permanent collection, and then we'll have a 3,000 square foot display area where we'll have exhibits where we'll feature a certain kind, maybe GTOs, or maybe we'll come and talk about the V8 engine and the different styles and so on. But we're going to have an exhibit area in there too, so it's going to be super popular. I think today, even kids, when we take education groups through, and even young adults, we had a group of guys that were in their 30s, and that's the first thing they wanted to see is they want to see those muscle cars, you know. So it's still something that's, and it's funny that the DeLorean, his dream car, wasn't really a muscle car, you know. Didn't have a big, powerful, huge engine in it, or even a Porsche engine, you know. It didn't even have that.
But he goes on with the old idea of catering to people's wants, needs, and desires. And really maybe the first demonstration of that was on the Model A. And the first Model A comes off the assembly line, and Henry Ford presents it to Thomas Edison. And you know, everybody's there, you know, governor, mayors, all the press. And if I pulled out a set of car keys and said, "Here you go, ma'am, here's your car," what would you say?
Wow.
Wow, or
Yeah.
thank you, right? You know, I always ask women because they're more polite than guys. Guys are going to say something stupid like Edison did. He looked at it and he said, "I don't like it." And the reason why he didn't like it is because it was a two-door sedan. Ford said it's not a problem. They pushed the car back in the factory, undid some bolts, took off one body, put on a convertible Phaeton body that he wanted, and away he drove happy as a clam, based on his wants, needs, and desires. And like I said, everything was based on the same chassis, right? So everything was interchangeable. Now, if you can do that, you can cater to everybody's wants, needs, and desires. That's big. Why? Because we're Americans, by God. We want more stuff. Yeah. Drive faster, further, and more comfort, some color, some design.
Yeah. Styling. And that's what he was all about. You know, very few people really have what it takes. Very few people have what it takes to break away from, you know, making the equivalent of $2 million a year and starting your own company against all odds. You know, the big three are powerful, right? They've put some people out of business, and Tucker's a perfect example. You know, they were threatened by him. They put him out of business. But with a fantastic Tucker car, you know, it was a modern, beautiful, exciting car. But he went off and did that on his own and had a great company, and the cars are still going. And you got to hand it to him for doing it, because very few people are capable of doing such a thing. So. Do you have questions on this? Anything? Yeah.
So what was the engine in it? Was it a straight six or
It was
V6
a
or V8?
Peugeot. It was a
Peugeot, Renault, Volvo combination.
But it was a 4-cylinder,
I
6-cylinder?
think it's a 6 and it's,
I think it's four. It's really.
and it's on a,
3.2.
it's on, when you look at it, it's in the rear, and it's right above, you know where the louvers are? Yeah. So there's two covers, the louvers come up, they're on these pistons, you know, and then there's a cover over the engine too, so you can, it's perforated, so you can lift both of them up, yeah. But it's a great, it's a, I love driving a car, I think it's a fun car to drive. Yeah.
So how did he get along with Bill Mitchell? 'Cause he was also a strong GM stylist at that same time frame.
That's interesting, I don't know. I know about Bill Mitchell, he just passed away, unfortunately. Yeah, just, I wanna say a year and a half, maybe 2 years, because time flies so fast. But Bill Mitchell, man, he did some phenomenal things. And some of he did some custom work, and he had just some amazing, had a huge influence, you know. I'm sure they probably got along pretty well. DeLorean was not, he wasn't like Lee Iacocca. You know what I mean? See, Lee Iacocca was sort of like, it was gonna be his way or the highway, right? I mean, he was a real strong personality, and then eventually he was trying to sell the idea of the minivan to Ford, then no, they didn't want, so they moved over, he moved to Chrysler and was a huge success there. But, yeah, I bet he got along well with them. I don't know, that's a good question. That's a very good question. We should have put Bill Mitchell's photograph in there as one of the key guys, because he was another big one.
Now, how many DeLoreans are here in Michigan, the percentage-wise, you know, throughout the
I don't know. I know there's a lot of them though, and I know there's gatherings of DeLorean club members, and they have meets sometimes, and I think there's a fair number. And I don't know. We know up north. We went up north, and they had a number of DeLoreans. Remember at the they have a couple car events up there. That's how we found out about
more
Bill.
north than down here.
Yeah, it could be.
Is it, I go from
Yeah, it could be.
here.
We've got a few, I know just around the museum area, we've got 2 or 3 people that own them right, right near us, so.
Does Henry Ford Museum have a DeLorean in it?
I haven't seen one, but yeah. You know, the thing about the Henry Ford is a vast, monstrous place, and they have a huge storage area. And when we built the Ford Foundation building, we asked them, do you have the first Model A, that was stamped by Henry Ford and given to Thomas Edison? And they had it, but it wasn't on display, it was in storage. And they said, well, we'll find it, and you can have that on loan, so it's on loan from them to us.
It's been there for like
We
7
have it
years,
on,
so.
it's been there for a long time. And it's great because it tells a story. You say, there's a picture of Henry, he's stamping the engine block, and he's got a rod with the A1 on it, star A1A, or no, star A1 star. And he takes a hammer and he goes bang, and he stamps that engine block.
So there's no limit on your loan?
No, well, not now, we don't know, there might be, you never know. But they stamp the engine block, and then he gives it to Thomas Edison. He wanted to make sure Thomas Edison had that first car because he was his good friend and mentor, they were very close. And so then Thomas Edison said, well, I really want a convertible, and so, nobody would tell Henry that probably, except Thomas Edison.
We have 4 or 5 times as many cars as the Ford does.
You do?
We have a lot of cars on display. They're more of the Ford Museum is a different,
It changed.
It's a
more of
museum of industry, really.
in history, and they have so many cool things. I mean, it's a magnificent place.
They've changed.
It's just very different than our
It's a lot of
place. But they have a big storage area, I guess, and they have a behind the scenes. I've not been behind the scenes. I'd like to do that sometime there. We went over with our education team, we had a wonderful tour, and got to see some things that were pretty cool. Their archive is amazing. If you're doing some research, you can call them in advance. You go and they'll pull things for you ahead of time. So they've got some amazing things that nobody in the world has. I mean, it's a totally different place than our museum, but our museum is we have some beautiful, we have 90 acres of grounds. and a lot of grass grounds out in a large campus.
Do you have like a test drive or something like for the power part that you did?
We have a couple round ovals on our campus. And of course, at our shows, we get every variation of antique car you can imagine. We have the early cars at some shows. We have a British show, a German show. We have a cruise, so we have all these different shows throughout the year. We have a gigantic show at the end of the season, and we have an oval track. And the British guys love to go out and time their cars on the track and compete.
We have a Model T
And they come
driving
up-
school.
Yeah, we have Model T driving
In
school.
fact, he teaches
And
the
so
driving.
we have a lot of fun with that. Have you ever experienced a Model T? Anybody ridden in one? And if you've ever driven one, they're totally different from any vehicle. Except maybe a John Deere lawn tractor, right?
There are
Because
three
you're-
pedals on the floor,
Yeah.
none of them do what you think they're gonna do.
But a Model T is very unusual, whereas the Model A is pretty standard, with the 3 speeds forward on the ground, on the floor, right? Model T is totally different than the Model A in most respects. So, but I don't know what the question was, but there are a lot of DeLoreans around.
What was the basic engine in the DeLorean?
It was a Volvo, Peugeot.
It's a 1200 cc's, it's not
I
real
think
big.
it's, yeah, and it was a combination of a number of efforts. Volvo was involved, Peugeot, and one other company. So it was sort of a unexpected, situation with the engine.
More about the training on it.
I don't know, I'm not sure if the transmission, it's a standard transmission. 4-speed. And it's funny, because I remember the first time I drove it, I almost got stuck, because you have to put it in reverse, you have to lift up on the gear shift to move it into reverse. So I couldn't get it in reverse, I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. You have to lift up and move it into reverse. I've never experienced that with a stick shift before. But it's geared nicely, and it's fun to drive, and it's
How many did they actually sell? Was it total production?
I don't remember. I should have that. I should know that. Yeah, it wasn't a huge number, but there's a lot of them out there, though. A lot of very enthusiastic owners, and they're fun, Fun cars.
In the summer or in the winter?
In the summer, yeah. And it's funny, because the windows on the cars are so, the door comes down, and there's a window right there, but there's a little window inside that window. That's the only window that opens. It's a small window. It's about this big. It's curved. It's a little electric window. And they're air conditioned, but still, that window. And some people, if they're in a parade or it's extremely hot, they'll just put the doors up and drive with the doors up. When they're moving relatively slowly, you'll see that in a parade or something where it's just too hot. In a lot of cars, if you're in a parade, it's a tendency to overheat a little bit, or you have an issue with because you're not really even moving. You're sort of idling, moving along. So some guys you'll see they'll put the doors all the way up. And there's little tiny windows, little electric windows. We were watching John, talking about Johnny Carson's DeLorean and how you could get locked inside it. He couldn't get it unlocked. There was some issue with the locking, so he had to get somebody to help him unlock the door. That'd be scary. You can't climb out the window in those doors. The window's like about, tiny little electric windows.
So the gentleman that's rebuilding the cars today in Texas?
Yes.
Does he have to apply all the emissions crap and everything to get through the legislation?
Yeah, I'm sure that he does, yeah.
Yeah.
And,
So that sucks more power.
Mhm. yeah, they'll take away some power.
Is he still using that Peugeot engine, or is he doing something more?
I think he's got a different engine.
You can Google it online and go right to the website.
But it's really cool that they bought up the parts and they're preserving it. The British government went in the plant They took the molds for the, where they would mold the metal and threw those in the bay, threw them in the ocean. They were so mad about the situation before it all got resolved, they threw it in the hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of metal molds. Dyes, I'm saying, dyes, yeah.
Took the economy away.
Yeah, the economy and the jobs, and if they just stuck with them, they probably would have continued on and made more DeLoreans,
Well, thank
Thanks,
you.
Mary. Thank you all for
Fred and
coming.
John, everybody.
Yeah. Come and see us at the Gilmore.